Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I am joined by a very special guest. As you know, everyone is a special guest to me because they took the time to be on my show. And I'm joined, you know me, I'm the most random person. I establish relationships in the world, friendships in the world. But, I heard her podcast and I loved it. And I was on her podcast, the developmental debrief. And which I'll put in the show notes, that episode that we did together. And Miss Sickle, I will call you Miss Sickle because I thought that was just a cool way to introduce you. She is doing the work in higher ed like me, but in a different aspect. And I was very interested into learning more about a different area, a department of higher ed. Well, I have a brief interaction with. I learned so much being on her episode and listening to her podcast and her guest, which is another way how we introduce ourselves. Shout out to Shayna. She was a guest on our podcast and it kind of introduced us. But for the listeners, the hostess with the mostest, please introduce yourself to the listeners about your podcast and what you're doing and the work you do.
Hey, everyone. My name is Kathryn Van Sickle, and I am so happy to be here. I think meeting Philip through LinkedIn has honestly been one of the highlights of this horrible time because, like he said, just meeting new people and expanding our horizons, even if it is on a screen, has so much meaning and has been really impactful for me. But I am a major gift officer at Columbia University. I have spent my career exclusively in advancement and higher education development. And in December, I launched my podcast, The Development Debrief, which, similar to Philip, can be found on iTunes and SoundCloud and Spotify. But that podcast is it's similar to this in the sense that I encourage my guests to tell stories and to talk about their experiences in fundraising. And I sort of had Philip on as a bit of a thought leader, but I also have fundraisers and consultants and different leaders in the field and also donors. So it's been a lot of fun.
Now, we didn't really go into the backstory because it was, you were asking me questions, but you said you launched your podcast in December. What was the thought process to create this platform and voice for this particular niche in higher ed? And what was just kind of like the originating thought? Like, where did you like, I think this industry is missing a voice and I want to create a separate lane for that. Where did that come about?
I think like most things, it was a confluence of several different things that had happened in my life over the past 6 months. The first was that I was doing graduate work in strategic communications. And I knew I was graduating. I guess technically it was in August that I finished my coursework, and I was used to spending, I know you can relate to this, I was used to spending a lot of hours doing homework and being in class. And so I wanted to take on a new exciting project. One thing. And then I went to a conference in September, the following month, and it was actually in Atlanta. And so I met from a different part of the country, and I started speaking up in the conference, even though I was kind of one of the younger people in the room, and people were interested in what I had to say. And so I thought, this is interesting. Maybe I do have a message to share. And then lastly, part of why I got into fundraising is because my dad is in fundraising. And so really special opportunity where I have a bigger network than most people because I'm able to meet people through him. And so why don't I take this privilege that I have and share it with other people by connecting the voices and creating a platform for the industry that didn't totally exist before.
I love that.
answer.
And where did why did you call it developmental debrief? Where I mean, obviously because it was related to advancement and development, and you're debriefing about it, or am I just kind of making that up as I go?
Well, no, that's a really good question. It's the reason why I called it the debrief is because, aside from the fact that everyone loves alliteration,
Yeah.
the fact that our field is, I don't want to say secretive, but it's quiet.
Yes.
We don't really share what we do in an open platform. And, when big gifts are closed, the news outlets and the articles are all written about the donors. We don't really take time to ask the fundraisers.
Yes, the unsung heroes, the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that, like, literally, that's why I was really very interested. I learned, as you said, when I had you on my podcast, I was very unfamiliar to the work being done behind the scenes, even in my own backyard, how much work goes into it. I told you I only had a brief interaction. You asked me, what is the interaction between, faculty, staff, and actual development people? And I was like, I don't know, not much in my forefront understanding, but as I become more active on a separate venture, the alumni base, then my interactions with that department has increased, because now I'm working with them on alumni collaboration. But as you said earlier, and I just kind of said that roundabout way to say that I think that's very familiar, that even behind the scenes, I think even in the university, people don't know the work that you are doing.
Yeah. And, our conversation made me think about this, and I've been thinking about it recently, kind of like how we're seeing in education, there's been collaboration between art and science and different kinds of research. I think higher ed professionals need to collaborate in the same way, that we're going to be better at what we do if we understand the work that you're doing with the students, and we can all just learn from each other.
So kind of going on a question, I love the purpose part. And, I already, the title of the episode would be More Than the Money. Obviously, the things that get the big love and the big shout outs is like, the big gifts. And then they go behind the scenes and like, oh my goodness, such donated a gajillion dollars and they built a new building and all those things. But it's more than money, right? As we know, the gazillion dollars goes into providing opportunities, right, behind the scenes and whatnot.
Absolutely.
How do you ingrain that purpose? Like, what I'm doing is more than just getting money
into the donors' minds, or how do I think about it?
I'm gonna say your mind, that the day to day, this is about you and your career. The day to day, I'm waking up, I'm doing this, I am doing the phone calls, I'm doing the outreach. I have more purpose in my job in this field. How do you get that to yourself?
Yeah, so the work of a fundraiser, a lot of people don't really know what we do. And when I somebody that I don't know and they ask me at a cocktail party, what do you do? I do explain to them it is sort of the sales function of a company or a corporation. We're going out, or you could even think of like pharmaceutical sales. We're on the road. We're trying to get people to buy into our mission. I like those skills that I have of being a go-getter, getting out there, putting myself in uncomfortable positions, making the ask. And I thought, should I move into a financial role? Should I try pharmaceutical sales? Should I try real estate? But every time I think about that, I come back to, while that's fun, what is the point? And the reason why I'm staying here in higher ed is because the point to me is so clear. I truly believe that education is the great equalizer. I mean, we see what's going on in today's world. We see incredible disparities across the country, across the world. Giving people a college degree or even a law degree, a business degree, these are ways that people can create better lives than they had themselves. And so if we can help bridge that, and I guess what I'm referring to very specifically is raising money for scholarship.
Yeah. Yes.
If we can help make that happen, and I know I help make it happen because I do it, it feels so good.
Yeah, it does. I see that. I see that purpose. Were you able to have these discussions, as you said, when you're going into the career with your father and say, "Yo, Dad, what gets you motivated? What gets you fired up?" And maybe that, I think maybe now that I learned something new about you, that probably infused, that this is like a family, a family thing, and you kind of see what he was going through. Did you ask him about that? Like, did you kind of define your purpose and how you get motivated through his motivation?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely talk about it, and it's fun that we can share it.
Hmm.
But I think more than him talking about it, I was able to see it at
Hmm.
a really young age. I saw he loved his work.
Hmm.
This is something that you might not see or think about, but we get to interact with extremely successful, brilliant minds.
Hmm.
Often what comes with that is they're authors, they've written books,
Hmm.
they're putting on exhibitions, they're opening, buildings in real estate, they're doing really important things.
Hmm.
And so what I saw my dad do from a really early age is like go and buy the book and read it and then
Hmm.
look
Yeah.
at the place.
Yeah.
And so in a way you're sort of immersing yourself in
Hmm.
excitement and in this innovation. So I love that.
Did you ever when you followed up with the alum, right? Like you say you're doing alum and that alum tells you their backstory, and then you feel like, wow, like that alum revealed, like, I got a scholarship when I was in college. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is that full circle piece. Did you ever get those instances happen to you?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I really love working at Columbia is because within the Ivy League, it is
Hmm.
more, well, first of all, don't quote me, even though people listening are hearing this. I believe it's one of the most diverse Ivies.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know the data, but what that means is that there are far, far, far more first generation
I was about to
students
say.
who have these incredible stories and who have gone on
Hmm.
to make incredible wealth, but it's first generation wealth. So it's a different kind of thing.
Yes, yes. And I was about to ask follow up what you meant by diversity, because as we know, there's different pockets, but you particularly talked about the first gen niche. And wow,
Right.
that could be very powerful. Like that these alum of this Ivy League have gone on to do big things when they kind of can go back in their mind and remember a time where they were given access through whatever thing helped them get to there.
Yeah. And I have to tell you two things that are just so positive filter. They make me so happy. Right before we went into sheltering in place, this was maybe in February, I went to an event and the dean of Columbia College gave remarks and an alum gave remarks. And there were two things I want to share.
Hmm.
The first was the dean said to the student, okay, first he said, for the alums in the room who receive scholarship, please stand.
Mm.
And a lot of them stood up, more than I thought would stand up.
Hmm.
Then he said, will the students please stand? And he said, look around. One day you can join them and
Hmm.
give the same gift back.
Hmm.
I just thought, wow, that's incredibly powerful. The second thing that happened was an alum came up and spoke, and he talked about how his scholarship changed his life, but he took it to another degree that I hadn't heard before. And what he said was, when you give a scholarship, yes, you are changing that person's life and you are enabling them to go on to great things. But it's so much more than that. You're changing that person's community,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
family, and that person is going to help all those other people, and that community is going to be all the better with the further education, etc. And I just thought
Mm.
pretty remarkable too.
Yeah. I mean, I took a diversity in higher ed class. I can't speak to the experience of being first gen. My parents are both, well educated and accomplished, but there is that gatekeeper mindset where we have to like take back, and this is across racial identities, but first gen or low SES, um, that sometimes that person going to college is bringing the weight of a whole community behind them. Like, dang, I got to get this good job because I'm gonna have to pay my mom's rent. And that's very powerful.
Exactly.
When you think about that, you don't think, oh man, they just got, some kids look stressed. They're not just going to college because they just want to get a degree. They're going to college because they need to get like a career, which in turn, that career is going to open doors for mom, dad, auntie, cousins, all these other people. Or maybe, you know, like someone sees my cousin, like the I am the gatekeeper for other people after me, where like my little brother is going to look at me now and want to go to college because of me and stuff like that. So I think
Right.
I think that connects to that guy's story. Like that's a very powerful thought. Like when you provide an opportunity for one person, just probably think of that's the micro part, but think of the macro impact of how that's going to open the door for like at least 3 other people. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, 10, who knows? But that was very impactful. I bet that resonated. Obviously it resonated with you, but I'm sure it resonated with a lot of people in that room at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, kind of thinking, you know, going off the place, how do you get to connect with students? How, you know, I put on there randomly, like I do this all the time when we were in person. I would just get up at my desk and just people watch and get get a feel for the energy of the campus. How do you feel you get ways to connect with students?
I love that you asked me that question because it's a hot button issue, I think. Mainly because it's not an easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with saying my first job was at my alma mater, and I went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was
Yeah.
in school. So I totally knew the student body because I was in class with them, and I was really plugged in and tuned in, and I understood the culture. I think it did make me better at my job.
Yes.
Then I came to Columbia, and it was not, first of all, it's a totally different institution.
Yeah.
Answering that question has to do with the school's culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our office is across the street from main campus, which I think makes a huge difference because proximity is important. So we see students, but the truth of the matter is there is not a natural connection or a natural, like, I know if I do this thing, I'll run into a ton of students. You really have to go out of your way. And I do think that's been a challenge, and it's something that I want to take on more when we get back into being physically together, because I think knowing students really authenticates the work.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I mean, I ain't gonna lie. Like, I even knew my first day going to my job, I'm an industry advisor. I put that in parentheses, but it means that I meet with employers and students. I will be totally remiss or not truthful if I said that when I saw my job description, I lit up with the student face-to-face interaction, and then the employer part, I was like, all right, okay, I'll do it, you know. And even, you know, everyone knows that like I'm in there, I'm in the I guess I would say in the streets, not really, you know, on the campus, but I knew that was one of my area of growth, was finding a connection to employers and feeling fulfilled, but students wasn't my problem. And so I definitely agree that for me, it's been always my fuel. My fuel has always been, if my job was solely employer relations, I would actually, honestly, I give you kudos, I would actually struggle to feel purpose. And I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll do what I got to do. But like, because my job definitely has a large student facing portion, you know, in there with the people, I see the tangible effect that I have on kids, like, you know, in real life. That gives me fuel. It's actually fuel for me. So I know I definitely, saying all that to say that I could see that being difficult for you. That would especially be difficult for me. I don't know. That was just a statement. I think, do you kind of feel like that statement's accurate? So we froze for a little bit. We're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back.
So this commercial break is brought to you by Positive Philter. Yes, myself, because I have no sponsors. So if you really enjoy listening to this podcast, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Every review helps spread the message of this podcast to other people. And if you have a favorite episode, please reshare that episode randomly on your Facebook wall or through your Instagram stories. The more and more people share these episodes and get them out to other listeners, the better this podcast will do. So, back to your regular scheduled episode.
And we're back from our commercial break. Thank you. As you can tell, I'm sponsoring myself because I have no sponsors. So when we left off, we were discussing the challenges of maybe not getting student-facing experiences, and we kind of present that a little bit. How do you foresee, this is a question thinking about for the podcast, how do you foresee yourself, or let's brainstorm together on the podcast, which ways in general could development workers or development people in that industry or in that niche get some more student-facing experience?
That's such a good point. I think proximity to campus is a huge one, and that's something that we're struggling with now, being remote. But something as simple as walking through campus, just seeing the students in their own habitat, but also attending meaningful events. Mm-hmm. So examples would be matriculation or, of course, graduation. And getting their perspective so that when you're doing the work, you can quote them on their own experiences. It makes it so much more authentic.
Now, so I remember I kind of brainstormed with you too. I said one of the biggest pieces of getting some student-facing experiences are student workers, volunteership. And I think you brought up, and I'm not sure, we went into full detail, but you've had some experience as a student worker yourself, right?
So that was another one of the reasons how I got into development, was that I worked a reunion one summer at my college, and I knew some students that were student callers, and I worked in admissions. And I think building that relationship with your school is so important. And I think it makes the conversation not start at zero, but right away you have a connection and you know where the people are coming from. Because as you know, there's so much more to a school than attending class.
Yes, 100%.
There's so much that we're doing as staff. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, and I find that interesting. And I found that you said like your father's in this and all that stuff. But what was some of the like lessons that you learned about professionalism, and maybe even lessons you learned about that industry from that experience that you say, wow, I kind of already learned this when I was a young student. What are some things that you found that you transitioned as a student worker yourself that was applicable to your work now, and say, wow, that gave me a really good foundation on learning something such as this? So maybe some life lessons you learned from that experience.
I'll tell you the first two things that came to my mind. The first is, I'll never forget, the job that I did as a student was to create the housing for reunion. So I was placing the alums in dorms with their friends, and it was kind of like a puzzle piece, because I was trying to get the quads together and then the singles, and making sure that everyone was happy and getting ready. And I remember getting so excited to meet them and tell them, like, I've placed you with your best friends in your ideal suite. And that moment of like meeting the people I was working for. And I remember someone got really angry with me and said, how could you have put us in singles? We wanted to be in this group. And I was so taken aback, because I was like, what? Like, I did everything I could,
Yeah.
Super naive.
Like customer service, but then you realize like you planned everything to the T, but they're just like, sometimes you're right. You didn't foresee them being upset.
Right. And so what ended up happening was I was able to think on my feet. It was a group of couples. And so I was able to say, okay, I want to switch with this group, and we have this group in a suite and this group in singles. And they said yes. And we fixed it on the spot. And so I think what I learned in that was, open a moment, and it all worked out. So that was one. I think the second thing that I learned is that really no one was
is good. This was good content.
You there?
Yeah, you cut out.
Yeah, so what I learned was that it's really important to be an independently motivated thinker and worker, because I really didn't get a whole lot of supervision, and that was okay because I was able to do it. But if I hadn't, I think I would have been in some deep water.
Gotcha. And from what I'm hearing about that, like planning it perfectly, you had to plan an alumni event where they came back and stayed in dorms like students again. And so
Yes.
how old were you when you did that?
I was probably 19, 20.
19, and you're dealing with like what, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds?
Yeah.
So I'm saying also you learned that could be pretty intimidating, but you were thrown into adult world,
Yes.
adult interactions as a 19-year-old, having to problem shoot and do problem solve with 40-year-olds. And I think that's some of the things I've always like also admire about one of our student workers in our office. It's like, dang, they're like remarkably mature at their young age, and they probably had to fast track maturity because on a day-to-day basis, they're not only working. I view them, obviously I have way more responsibilities. I earn my paycheck. I'm not a student, but they do a lot of work that is like adult work. Like not to minimize their work. They're not, and troubleshooting as in when they answer the phones, they're answering the world. So they are really dealing with like adult issues. And so it's kind of like, I think one of the things, if I can go back in a time machine, I probably would appreciate in my own experience doing some student work experience myself, whether that was on campus. Well, I mean, I did part-time jobs but I really wish I would have done like a more like office-y job, like a student working experience on my college campus at JMU to really get that experience. And I think.
And the other thing is, like, I don't know how all students are, but for me, I took it so seriously.
Oh, they joke. Well, they take it seriously. I joke with them too much, and they have to be like, Philip, be serious, and they check me. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is like a real job, and hours and showing up on time and not missing your shift is so responsible. And so, like, one of my biggest things, as I guess is one of my things on the podcast is brainstorming with you, is I think any division in any department can have an opportunity to have someone as a student work at some capacity, or, I say all budget allows. And if it can't be work, some kind of volunteer capacity to have students volunteer in a professional realm within their office, because one, it exposes them to real work. And on the flip side, it exposes those office to ask them questions. Like if I'm making a flyer, sometimes I show it to the students, say, what do you think about this flyer real quick? Like almost like a focus group right there. What do you, we're about to post. And I sometimes post, I was like, I'm about to post this on Instagram. What language would you think they like? What would your audience, what would they like listen to? Like, is this a good time of day to do this? Like, I know
That's
Saturday, no kid wants to go to an event Saturday at 8:00 in the morning, right? So, like just being mindful of where they're at. So some of those things. I don't know. Where do you see the future of this going? Or maybe not even the future. I mean, where do you see the future of development going? Or also maybe more concretely right now, how do you think like COVID is really affecting this?
Well, so I think what's really interesting when it comes to higher ed is that we're asking people to invest in the future and to give to things that they aren't necessarily going to see the impact tomorrow. And I think in a time of crisis, people want to give a man a fish. But ed fundraising is teaching a man to fish. And so we have that sort of uphill battle right now of where people are wanting to keep businesses open, and they're giving to Black Lives Matter and changing the police, system and things like that because people are in crisis. If we can tap into that, and we will raise, such as student relief funds. People responded really amazingly to things like that. But I think what's going to need to happen over the next couple years is to help teach our donor base how to respond with the same intention for something that is longer term.
Yeah. Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah. Like, creating like thinking about how you're donating to a systemic change on a college campus.
Yes.
Like not like just one scholarship for one kid, but we're trying to change accessibility for a larger system through this program or through this endowment. That this is not just a one-time thing. This is a systemic thing that we're contributing and trying to change and build a larger door of access. Not just like, oh, we got one guy in, hooray! So kudos to us, we did it. More like we built a sustainable model of accessibility in regards to education through the donating.
Yes, and I think universities are doing that work right now, and we've been doing it all along, but we need to come up with the language.
Yeah.
Let people know that that's what's happening.
Gotcha. Like, yeah, I think that's the main thing is language is what's happening. And I think we already kind of touched upon it on the earlier part of the episode, but just in general, about just creating that narrative of that what you're doing is impactful and means something deeper than dollars. Like I know the bottom line is money for anything, but let's view money as a resource to help rather than a resource to stunt and involve. It's sometimes resources such as money is viewed as could be a not gatekeeper, but key for way deeper than just showing off for your friends and, look at me. It's more like I'm using this as a resource to help other people. So I think you're right, like that long-term help, not just real quick spurt help,
Right.
Systemic help. So, we might have a little extended, maybe it's just a little shorter episode. I forgot the timing of the first half, but let's do our shot for shot. Maybe a little two. Since we're, we're feeling good, we get 2 questions each. This is the first time ever I've done a shot for shot, 2 though. So you go first, I go first, don't matter, but we get to ask each other 2 questions as they relate to this episode or don't. It don't matter, too. You want to go, we'll go back and forth, but do you want to go first or I'll go first?
Oh my gosh, so many thoughts are going through my head right now. You go first.
Okay, during this time, what is a show, and let's say lighthearted, because what is a show for fun that you've been watching during this pandemic?
Okay, so I watched the entire season of Sweet Magnolia. Have you heard of it?
No, isn't it a movie?
It's a series on Netflix,
okay.
And it's like #1 the past couple weeks, but it's just this really sweet show about a small community in the South and these 3 women who grew up together, they're best friends, and they are trying to figure out their lives. I think they're in their like early 40s, but they have kids and there's a bunch of plot lines. It's really sweet.
I could have sworn that's a movie. They must have turned it into a series.
Maybe.
Because I heard that word before. Okay, that's good. I might tell my wife to watch that because I'm probably not going to. And the only reason I say that is I can't sit still to watch any series. I literally don't make it through anything. My attention span, I can't. I'm like the prime example of a show quitter. I quit shows.
Okay.
Like I lose interest, really interest. There's like only a very handful of shows, and those are elite shows that like caught me from beginning to end. But like they're universally known as shows that do that, like Breaking Bad.
Like Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, The Wire, like shows that like everyone had to watch all the way through. But I quit on a lot of shows.
Okay, so my question for you is, have you cooked or baked anything on your own during COVID-19?
Oh, so you don't know this about me, but I'm actually the primary cook in our house. Meaning no, my wife can cook, but I just like doing it the most. So
that's awesome.
So matter of fact, I grill. I try to learn new recipes. I try to use other cuisines. I try to go, be international.
What's your go-to?
Oh yeah, my actual potluck go-to for work is mac and cheese. But like real deal, not out of the box, like real mac and cheese. That's like my go-to for potlucks. And then just anything grilling. I love to grill. But I'm going to give you a little secret, but it's not really a secret. Grilling for men is literally just getting out the house and you're saying you're cooking. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. But I literally just have my music. I have my beer. And I'm just sitting around watching the meat cook. But I'm not really, you don't need to watch it. You know that like if you walk away, it's not going to burn, but I'm tending to but grilling is my zen. I find peace in grilling.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, my second question is kind of going to be related, but it is out of my mind. What was the biggest gift that you had attached to your name? And was it like, was it so big that you were like, I can't believe people are this rich in the world? You know what I'm saying? Like, because one of my friends works in donations, and he was spitting me on the game about that, and it just boggled my mind that people was this rich in the world. But go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry to say I have not yet closed a 7-figure gift, but
Okay.
I've done a couple of $500,000 gifts.
Oh, just $500,000? Wow, that's big monies. Like, so you're saying that, like, you see how casually you just said that? Like, a 7-figure, 7 figures $1 million or whatever, but $500,000, I just can't even fathom that lump sum in anything. Like, I mean, buying a home, you know, you're chipping away. You can get $500,000 home. And I've heard of mortgages and stuff like that. But just the fact that someone has that as a money to give is the craziest. I can't even fathom that. I can't even fathom that. That's crazy.
And think about the fact that they could give that away and not even feel it.
That's the nuttier part. Did they get something named after them for that? You don't have to say their name, but did they get a bridge?
You can have a named scholarship.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. I told everybody I want to be enough, create enough of a legacy that I get an outhouse named after me on campus, or a little bench, or like one.
That would be fun.
Or like one little brick. I think that probably costs like $10,000 or something. I don't know, man. That's crazy. That's crazy. That boggles my mind. Okay, here's your second question.
What is a new skill that you built during COVID-19?
A new one. I mean, I'm quite skilled. I'm just joking. I don't know. I haven't started it yet, but I really want to get better at photo editing.
That's cool.
And photography. Or maybe not even photos, really. Let me be real. I really want to get better at photo editing in a sense for flyers and graphics and graphic design. So I do have the Adobe suite. I just haven't even started learning on it yet. So
yeah,
I would like to learn how to make my own flyers and graphics, because one of my LBs, one of my line brothers, is so good at it, and we rely on him so much. And I'd be sending him things like, yo, can you make me a flyer real quick? And not that I want to take away his usefulness. Maybe he'll be my advisor on it, but I want to be able to be self-reliant on stuff like that, like self-reliant on flyers, especially as, you know, we're fellow podcasters. I want to be able to make my own graphics.
Well, you made a pretty cool graphic for this season of the podcast.
I didn't make that like really cool. I just took a slide from Google Slides.
Okay.
I'm giving out all my secrets. Like I used PowerPoint and all that stuff for, you know, like that's not that cool. It was already like a template. You know what I'm saying? I want to make something like not template. I don't want to make a template. I want to make a dope flyer from scratch, like no template, nothing, and learn how to do that on my own, really conceptualize that. So
that sounds good.
I'm going to play around and learn that, but that's a skill I want to learn as applicable to the podcast.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. You know, we're going to connect again. We're overlapping in this podcast world, you know, writing articles, sharing colleagues, sharing connections. I mean, this has been quite a dope partnership and collaboration.
I would call you a friend.
Yes, I'll text you 100%. Did I send you the new friend survey? Did I send you that?
No.
Okay, I'll send you my new friend survey. I have one. It's actually like not a serious survey. I send it to people as a joke, but I'll do that to learn about my friends. But I really learned a lot. I think I learned a lot about the world of development, which is going to help me, as I told you earlier. It's going to help me in my alumni board position to know about that world, because it helps me connect a little bit more to the story of our alumni, because that's a big part of it, right? The gift giving and the donations, that's a big part of the alumni experience and alumni base, and keeping them connected to the university, right? What can they give back to the university? Mm-hmm. So I'm learning a lot about that. So I'm going to learn a lot more in the future. So for the listeners, the stage is set. The platform is yours. Let's do the shout outs and plugs. And as I say, you shout out anyone you want to, mama, daddy, anyone, shout them out, give them love. but then also additionally plugs and concretely what you're working on and things that where the listeners directly can follow up with you and know about your show and your and what you're working on. So stage is set, shout outs and plugs.
Well, I have to shout out first and foremost my parents, my dad for being an amazing idea generator and door opener for me with the podcast. I'm so grateful to him. My mom for listening every single week to my episodes and acting interested whether or not she was.
And she's giving you those numbers, man. That's what I'm telling you.
Exactly. I'm like, listen to it on your phone.
Yes. I do that too. Okay. You know the secrets.
My brother for coming here. We're all together right now during COVID-19. My brother for just being a good listener, for finding good shows, for buying White Claw for us on the weekends.
Yes.
And I want to shout out my best friend and most amazing colleague, Abby Smitka, for just calling me every day and being so in touch. And I am telling you guys, you're hearing it here first. I'm creating an email account and a website now for the podcast because it's to that degree. And I want to shout out my amazing team at work, the university development team at Columbia, and just thank all the people who are bringing positivity during this really difficult, really challenging time.
And then how can the followers follow up with you? What avenues, the social handles, and directly your podcast and stuff?
So everyone should feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just find my name, Kathryn Van Sickle. There's a space between Van and Sickle. The podcast Instagram is at Debrief, and feel free to DM me there or reach out, follow there. That account is great because it shows the pictures and the faces of the people that are speaking. And then you can listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast or the SoundCloud website. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from anyone who wants to engage in further conversation about development or podcasting or basically anything they feel passionate about. So thanks for having me, Philip.
Yes. And as I said earlier, I'm not in that world, but I connected because I just saw that one of our mutual connections on LinkedIn was a guest on her show. And this wasn't a world that I was familiar with. So as I said earlier, you know, certain things about podcasts for me, I learned about different worlds, different industries that might not necessarily be forefront for me, but her episode has transferable knowledge, not just about, you know, the development, but also like just industry leaders, influencers, people that have really strong work ethic and just really good habits, regardless of what industry. You can learn about, you know, how people approach work. So please check out our podcast, regardless of what industry you're in. I mean, if you're in her industry, yes, please check it out. But if you're just a higher ed professional, such as myself, you can get some value out of this podcast because you learn about, a new pocket of the industry or a new pocket of the higher ed arena that's maybe not so known to everyone, but has a huge impact. So please check out her podcast. Now,
thank you so much.
If you have any questions for the podcast, please leave it in the comments or the Google form that I've created for questions, or you can leave a hotline or phone number for the hotline, which is 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. I'm just very interested in engaging. Thank you for listening. Please share this episode with your family and friends. Please connect with my lovely guest. And thank you. We're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.